and we can send out the. All right, team. So we're back today for our shift call. So today we're going to be going over tactic number 10, which is expand the options, creative financing. And just to make sure, kind of set the tone for the rest of this month, guys. So next week, we're going to go over tactic number 12. We will not go into tactic number 11. You will read that one on your own. That one is specifically talking about REOs, foreclosures, and short sales. Since we're not in a high market of, dealing with those right now, it's not the current market of the moment. I'm not going to get deep into that. However, I do encourage you to read tactic number 11 that starts on page 223. We'll wrap up with number 12 on next Wednesday. And then from there, as we go into July, most of you are, all of 3 of you are in the coaching program. So we'll just go to our normal coaching sessions at that time. So I'll update you guys all on what July is going to look like, because I'm going to start doing some more group coaching on Wednesdays as well. So, because normally this call, so you guys know, was made available to the entire office. So
aren't we going to do the MREA? We're not.
We're recording right now. You messed up my recording. Now I got to start all that again and do the interest.
Oh,
It's been moved to Zoom because they had technical difficulties, so they couldn't get through to everyone on the other with this stuff that they have in here.
All right, so
No,
what's going on? Am I going to keep going?
Can
All right.
Susan look on
Okay,
with you, Chaz? Can Susan just look on with you? Is that okay?
There's no other guys. I'm not screen sharing everything. We're just having a conversation. There's
Yeah.
no screen sharing or anything going on. So you guys can sit near each other. All right. So let's get into tactic number 10. So again, the chapters around expanding the options through creative financing. So I'm going to read a few things and then we'll start going through it. So on page 197, it says that affordability drives the real estate industry. In fact, you might even say that affordability is the real estate industry. Buyers must be able to buy in order for sellers to be able to sell. Affordability is the juice that makes the market go or stop. If you want to know where the market is headed, just check how affordable a house is. Let's talk about that. That packs a lot. So unmute if you're able to. Chaz, Susan, what'd you hear me say? What'd you hear out of that? Unmute. You guys are muted. Chaz, you're muted.
how's that?
Yep,
Can you
you're
hear
good.
me now?
Yeah.
We heard everything.
Well, what'd you interpret? What's your understanding?
Oh, well, my understanding is that if no one can afford to buy, houses aren't going to sell.
Yeah. Are we experiencing a little bit of it right now? Would you guys say?
I think so. People
Okay.
are trying to get as much as they can, and it kind of squeezes the demographic of the buyer.
Okay. So a lot of buyers got priced out just because of the increase in price points in general. Before, I mean, geez, in Naples, you used to at one point be able to get under 350 a single family home in a non-gated area. Now, good luck trying to find that.
Yeah.
So they got priced out through the increase in prices. And how else did they get priced out?
Bidding wars.
Well, bidding wars, yeah. What's happening right now as we speak?
The interest rates rising, so your $500,000 approval is now at $350,000 approval.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That is huge. And that's one of the things that affects and is going to affect from this point forward, where sellers are actually going to be pricing our homes.
Yeah, absolutely. At the bottom of that page, it says in a shift, finding creative ways to help buyers afford to buy and sellers afford to sell is the game you must learn to play and win, or buying and selling literally slows down to a crawl. Do any of you have buyers? Have you been hearing of people with buyers that now, because of the increased price points and increased rates, they're not buying? They're just kind of like, wait until the market goes down.
I haven't heard personally, but I'm sure that's probably 80% of the market right now.
Yeah, there's a ton. I mean, I saw Mary nod her head, Andres. Yeah, so here's what's happening, right? We have buyers, and I can give you examples of buyers that I talked to 3 years ago who were gonna wait for the market to go down. I keep saying this. They were waiting for the market to go down 2 or 3 years ago. It never went down. Now the rates are up, price is still stable, still up there, and they can't afford anything. Can't afford anything, and they are renting. And what happened to rent prices? Did those go up too?
Everything went up, especially because of insurance. That's a big reason rent's gone up.
Exactly.
And not only that, what about builders who have buyers under contract who, when they first went to see them, a year ago,
yeah,
interest rates were 3 or 4 and now they're 7.
Yeah.
And they can't afford to buy that house anymore. They can't get a mortgage.
Exactly.
So we have builders also who are going to start selling homes, spec, sightseeing.
Yep. Yep. Let me ask you guys, did anyone here already read this chapter?
I was supposed to.
Okay, so Mary did read it, Chaz was supposed to. Let me ask you, so maybe, what was your thought process around creative financing before you read it, Mary? Feel free to jump in here. I don't know if you're able to speak clearly now. Are you at Starbucks?
Can you hear me?
No, go ahead and mute. No.
I'll type.
From Patricia.
Yeah, what about you guys, Jazz, Susan, Andres? You want to make any comment here? What did you interpret creative financing to be prior to reading the chapter, if you have, or if you haven't, what do you think about?
Without reading it, adding points.
Say that again.
Without reading it, I would just say off the top of my head, adding points.
Yeah.
Points. Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right. Anything else that comes to mind when you think creative financing?
I guess mixing cash, like how much you're gonna put down, make it more lucrative, or putting less down, basically changing cash to financing.
Okay. Yeah. Some different things. Okay. On page 199, it says, a shift can change all of this. In a shift downward, not many houses are selling. So if sellers still want to sell, they may have to employ creative financing. And when it says here, a shift can change all of this, is talking, because in the previous paragraph, it was talking about the fact that in a seller's market, the reality is the sellers don't have to do anything. They list the house, they're going to get at or above, they're going to get multiple offers. And it's a name of the game is almost like, what's the fewest contingencies that I can get on an offer? Who's the one that's going to offer me no appraisal contingency, no financing contingency, no inspection contingency? I don't know if you guys saw on like different Facebook group, like Lab Coat Agents. I mean, there's a lot of memes out there, also like funny pictures of what people did to win offers. Think of, what were some of the things? Post occupancy, sellers were getting, I had one seller get 2 months of free rent.
I did that. My seller gave 6 months of free rent.
Jesus.
6 months, but they got $100,000 over list price.
Yeah.
So 6 months free rent is nothing. They
Yeah.
already got that 100,000.
Yeah, they were happy to do that. So for a while, it was sellers that were getting everything they wanted and more.
Not now.
It's going to shift the other way now. Now sellers are going to be giving things away in order to get the deal to work, to come together. And anyone who's ever done a deal, or whether you were on the buyer side yourself, meaning you were like the person buying a home, you kind of already have an idea of what creative financing is. And one of the ones that will come up is, for example, seller credit, where the seller gives a credit to the buyer for closing costs. Have you guys heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's actually one of the ways, and one of the creative ways that you can go about putting a deal together. So we'll mention that here. But the key thing to make a point of here is that the market we were in, sellers didn't have to get creative. They were just put the house out, they got their way. Now they're going to have to get creative and helping to get a deal together. Let me read Mary's comment here. So I hadn't thought of it. I'm actually going to ask my seekers. Seekers, sellers, I think you meant sellers. Okay. Right. All right. I do want to ask a good timing on the chapter. Perfect. Yeah, Mary, that's a good idea there. So one thing before we start getting into it, Creative financing is a combination of knowledge and skill. To find success, you must understand each party's motives, learn the choices available to each, and then you must creatively suggest solutions. So understanding motivation is definitely important here as you start recommending creative financing. On page 200, there's a chart that says there's the 3 areas of creative financing. There's creative things the sellers can do to sell their house. There's creative things the buyers can do to purchase a home. And then there's creative things the lender can do to finance a transaction. So we're going to go through right now, essentially have a discussion around each one. This is going to be the part where you're going to want to answer questions, and I'm sure between the two of us we'll make up an answer, right? We'll give you good answers. What? You're going to make it up?
No, I said you were.
Oh, she's making it up. So just be cautious. Whatever you hear from her, be careful. So I'm going to start on page 201. So it says creative financing begins with you simply knowing where the bottom line sits for sellers, buyers, or lender. You must first know that what everyone wants before you can suggest a creative way to get there. So the first creative way, and it starts on page 202, is and probably the most common form is seller contributions or seller concession. That's probably the most common one you guys have seen. And we're starting to see it come back to the market now. And here's what I mean, like for a while, places such as like a lot of homes in Cape Coral, Lehigh Acres, that first time higher price point,
Yeah.
let's call it like that 315 and under, it was very common to receive an offer with, hey, let me get 8,000 or 10,000, or, you know, let me get 3%, 4% towards my buyer's closing costs. For a while there, that just completely disappeared. And yet now we're seeing people, Vanessa, this is the book that we're doing these calls off of. This is Shift book. We have the recordings, by the way, Vanessa, you can go back and watch the recordings on the rest of the calls that we've had around this. So that's a common one.
Very common.
You guys have any questions when it comes to seller contributions, how that works and how it can help you put a deal together?
Do you have to read it up?
Yeah, one of you guys has to mute.
Yeah, one has to be muted. You have to be muted when somebody's, the chat should be muted. Susan's gonna talk.
Got it.
I can hear you, Susan, from Chaz's computer, so go ahead.
She's just logging on to
I'm
hers.
just getting on to this. On my laptop.
Okay, well, you were gonna say something?
No,
Okay.
So is seller contribution straightforward? Do you guys have any questions around how to utilize that to help you put deals together? What questions, thoughts you guys have around it?
How do you get a seller to want to give something?
Yeah, well,
I mean, if that market is in the beginning stages of a shift, every seller is egocentric. It's going to say, oh, well, I don't have to move. My house is going to sell at the price I want, blah, 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 blah.
well, they will, but what are some signs that they're not going to get what they want? What would be the first sign that says, hey, we're not getting the price and terms we are looking for?
Nobody coming to the open houses, nobody making any offers, nobody, or the house sitting for more than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Got an offer.
For a sign.
You got it right there. So that's a simple one. You know, as you spend more time on the market, not selling, price is generally the big factor. So one of the ways that you can go about attracting an offer is offering a seller concession. And here's the thing, again, the market we're coming from, we have to be the ones to train the sellers now, because you're right, Chaz, they're gonna be like, whoa, my friend didn't have to do that. Yeah, but your friend sold 6 months ago and they did it way before things started to shift.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here are times where it comes up. Sometimes you just don't have a choice. If I have to get moved in 2 months, I'm under contract, but there's a major roof issue or a major repair that has to get done, or the buyer will walk, very likely they're going to ask for a seller credit.
Yep.
And the seller's going to make a decision, right? Because they're either going to say no, put it back in the market and get faced with the same issue and lose time, or they're going to say, no, let's get this deal done. It's an issue and we got to get, move forward.
Yeah, when it's a repair issue, it's a little bit different, because with the repair issue, the seller's gonna have to fix it one way or another.
Yeah.
Whether they pay for it themselves, they do it at concession, they put it back on the market, they're still gonna have to pay for it.
Mhm.
So that's a little bit different. I think when have that, it's different than when you have a buyer request.
Yeah.
Closing costs, prepaid credits and things like that. Even though
It's the chat.
concession, it's a different type of a concession.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Thank you for calling that out. I mean, there are buyers that can't close without it.
Yeah.
Like meaning they've already saved up maybe the 3.5% to 5% down. They don't have the funds for closing. That's one simple way for the seller to put that deal together.
And that's gonna start happening now because the prices are still high. Their interest rates are higher. They can't afford as much. So that is gonna start happening.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And do you know how to find out how much if they need that? Do you know who you should talk to for your buyer?
The title lady downstairs.
Your mortgage company.
Mortgage.
You talk to the mortgage company and go through everything and they will tell you if your buyer does not have the closing costs in order to do that and what they need to ask for your mortgage. That's why you need to keep a very, very good relationship with your mortgage company.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a good point about that. A lot of times a buyer will meet with the lender goes through their disclosure.
Correct.
And they forget these things. The lender could have said straightforward to them, hey, you're gonna need $8,000 in closing credit. Buyer just moves on and hey, let's go shopping. And if they don't tell you that directly, and you don't talk to the lender, you could be writing up a contract with somebody who actually needs and must have a seller credit in order to even close. So just know that as homes now, as more inventory becomes available, the sellers will again have to get competitive again and start to offer some credit in order for the deals to get put together. So you will start seeing more of that coming up here. Mary, were you gonna ask a question? Oh, okay. How do you advertise the concession? Do you put it in the MLS write-up? So here's the thing, it's a negotiation piece. I don't write anything in there. Up front, you don't say, unless you're a seller, here, well, there are times I see
Repair
it.
issue.
Yeah.
They'll just say, I'll give you a credit for carpeting.
Carpet.
Or I'll,
Yep,
flooring. A lot of people will do that, or they'll say, seller will give you $30,000 for a new roof.
Roof or
I've
something.
seen that before,
there,
or a new AC, so.
yeah, there are situations where a seller will say, hey, put this into the write-up, but at the end of the day, it's a negotiation point.
But the write-up doesn't go in the public comments.
Yeah,
That write-up
confidential.
goes into the confidential comments in MLS.
Yep. One thing I want to make a point of with this, and if you guys look, if you have the book on page 203, because this does come up a lot as well, meaning should I receive a seller credit or a reduction in the price? And in the book, it goes over the difference of the seller paying $5,000 towards closing versus them just reducing $5,000 in the purchase price. Obviously, them reducing $5,000 in the purchase price still requires the buyer to come out with the cash needed to close, but it will reduce their payment versus them just building it into the mortgage, having a slightly higher payment, but then saving that cash to maybe do other repairs or again, just to be able to close on the property. You know, I'll give you like a personal example. Like when I bought my house in Fort Myers recently, I needed a couple extra $1,000. So I asked the seller to give me $6,000 in closing credit. They're more than happy to give it to me. Obviously, I'm paying for it because it's part of my mortgage.
Right.
Yeah.
But one of the things too, with that reduction of the purchase price by $5,000, that, and it doesn't seem like very much, but that $30 a month can make or break somebody if they're doing an FHA loan or something. So that $30 a month actually speaks volumes with your income to debt ratios.
It's going to actually come up later on the buyer side when we get to buyers, because there definitely is an impact there too. So jump into the next one, seller buy down. I think Chaz, you mentioned this one, like points, so having the seller pay points. Is that what you were referring to earlier?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to comment on that one?
What, are you talking about seller paying points or the buyer paying points?
Well, right now we're working on the sellers. We'll get to the buyer later, but the seller can pay points.
They can, I just know, I've never had a seller pay points, ever.
Well, remember, we're going into a new market and we're just talking about creative financing options. The key,
But I'm talking, okay, so I've been in the industry a long time and I've never, I don't have experience with sellers paying.
here's the reality.
Points.
It's a
And
credit.
I think that
It's
just a
it's all
credit.
wording. It's all wording, guys, because here's the thing,
Yeah, it
whether,
doesn't-
Where it says
when,
in the corner.
say that again?
No, I'm talking,
Oh, yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, so here's the thing with buy down, it either can be written as that, or it can be written as down as a credit towards the buyer's closing costs and prepaids. Ultimately, it's gonna hit
Right,
the
it's the
same
same
line.
thing, it's just different wording.
But the wording is important, because the wording, if we're using it specifically for point buy down, I mean, that's huge right now, because we can get somebody a better rate. So when you go to a seller and say, hey, unfortunately, you know, we're gonna need $5,000 to get the rate down towards closing costs, I mean, you just have to be specific what it's for. So I think that's still,
And that could bring their mortgage down to a certain
Sure.
percentage, and that
Yep.
would help.
that would bring it down to an affordable payment. The next one on page 205,
I'm
and
gonna have to use that sometime. I
Yeah.
like that. That's a really,
Mhm.
boy, that's a really good option, people. You should like
So-
keep that, highlight that in your book.
Yeah, well, what I would recommend is, I mean, have all 8 in your arsenal. The reality is, in some way, you're gonna use some combination of this to make things work. I mean, I'll tell you, for looking at all the 8 options for sellers and what they can do, the one that I've always just used the most is just the seller contribution, because that solves most of the issues the buyer is gonna have. So on page 205, it gets into owner financing. What do you guys understand about owner financing? Where would that potentially be used?
And the lease back,
No, owner financing, just owner financing.
Susan, you should have an answer to this.
I just had that come up. It was a builder actually who was looking to make an offer, but his money wasn't going to be available for just a little bit longer. He was waiting for some properties to close. So he asked if the seller would consider seller financing. And there was an amendment, I know that, that I had to have along with the contract.
And that's short term. Typically, sellers financing is typically 1 to 3 years. I don't think well,
He's
it might
specified.
change now,
He
but
specifies 12 months or under,
12
and he
months.
gave me the amount that he wanted to ask for her to finance for him.
Yeah, so here's what I've seen come up in owner financing often is where, first off, who would owner finance? Typically, it's somebody who has a paid for property.
Yeah.
Paid in cash, and they basically want to be the bank.
Mhm.
So I've actually offered before on a duplex, and I never got accepted, but I offered to do owner financing, meaning I wanted owner financing. And I just did it over, so 30-year mortgage, so amortized over 30 years, whatever rate I wanted to offer, but then a balloon of that 3 to 5 years, where in 3 to 5 years, then you have to refinance the property, fully get the seller paid off. How would owner financing help a buyer and a seller? How could it benefit both sides? You
Well,
guys-
the buyer is going to be able to not have to use as much cash or have it show up in banking. And the seller is actually going to make more money because they're going to be earning interest on the money that is they're
Mhm.
lending to the buyer.
Yeah. There's thank you, Susan, that's great.
That's good.
One of the websites I follow, biggerpockets.com, which is more like an investor website. A lot of the guys I see talk on there about owner financing it. They're leveraging it, first off, because they don't have to qualify, they don't have to use their credit. I mean, granted, the seller should do their own due diligence to make sure,
Yeah.
and obviously each party needs to have an attorney involved to actually get this written up, and yet I'll see investors go towards this quite often where they'll pay more of a premium for that owner financing because the seller's getting a little bit more money, they're earning interest on it. And then again, from the buyer's perspective, I don't need the cash, I don't need to qualify for a traditional mortgage and the headaches that come with that. So that's potentially an option. And I've actually seen somebody even recently in the Naples office did it they did it on the buy side on a commercial deal, and they literally financed, like, yeah, I forgot how the details were, but literally an attorney wrote it up, and basically the seller, the buyer, I'm sorry, is actually paying the agent. Essentially, the agent owner financed a portion of what the seller needed, what the buyer needed to buy the place. So it's thinking outside the box, and you need a legal team here, you need an attorney. This is not something you put into the additional terms. This is something you need to have an attorney involved. Owner financing, again, good when you have a paid-for property. Typically, you're not gonna find that in a seller's market, because they can just cash out. You find that in a market where homes are sitting and, the sellers are pretty stuck on their price.
Yeah. So he was willing to pay full price for seller financing versus if she didn't accept it, then his offer was gonna change quite drastically.
Yep.
To him
Yeah.
financing.
Let me see some, Mary, how do you, what if you have no offers, so you hope to attract people? Elaborate on that question, Mary, but if you have no offers, you're looking to attract people. I mean, reality, at the end of the day, is pricing is gonna be still a big factor, but could you put into the notes, in the confidential notes, hey, sellers open to owner financing? And that's what would attract somebody. And I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, I believe in the MLS, under finance, you can actually put, you can put owner financing available.
Yes,
Mhm.
you can put that, that's one of the options.
Yeah.
in MLS.
There's agents that search for properties that are owner financed,
Mhm.
so they can go towards that. So,
And you should start looking for those come the first of the year, because as the market keeps changing, you're gonna notice things like that. So those will come up.
yep. On the same page, it goes into a contract for deed, which basically the difference is ownership does not change hands until the entire sales process price is paid in full. Because with owner financing, title will change over still, and there'll just be essentially a note, mortgage,
there's a note.
yeah, there's a note on it, versus the other way around with contract for deed, the owner still has title until that note's paid off. All right, the next one is on page 206. It starts getting into a seller second. You guys know what that is?
No, sir.
You wanna hit that one?
It's a second, this
Mortgage.
is hard to explain. Yeah, it's
No,
a second-hand mortgage.
Yeah, it's almost like owner financing.
That's what
Um,
It is like owner financing.
It's a combination of, let's look at it this way. Actually, look on page, well, you guys don't all have you have the book, Chaz, or no?
Yes.
he does.
Andreas, do you have the book? Yep. Mary, you have the book. Vanessa, I'm sorry, well, write this page down. And you can, once you own this book, you can take a look at it. So on page 207, actually, there's a pretty good example of it. If you guys look at the chart on page 207, the left side is with no seller second, and then the second column has a 15% seller second. So if you look a little bit further down, third row from the bottom, it says the seller second is a $60,000 mortgage. So essentially, the purchase price is $400. They're financing $320, and then the seller's financing $60,000. Notice how it affects PMI, no PMI, and notice how it affects the payment. So notice that the payment actually worked out to be better with the seller second versus having no. Stop. So loud.
I know, that's why
Jesus.
I moved it.
Do you guys see the visual there on page 207?
And this is also recorded as a mortgage, so if anything ever happened, that's a mortgage.
Great. So, and what happens when somebody doesn't pay their mortgage?
You have to foreclose.
Right.
Meantime,
Yeah,
Right. So who gets paid first though in that scenario?
the
the
bank.
bank.
The bank and then the seller. Yep.
They do not take, and that's one of the reasons why it's called the second loan, because they don't take first place.
All right, the next one, timing, okay, page 208, it starts getting into lease options and lease purchases. So a little bit further down, so a lease purchase simply stipulates that the buyer will buy the home at the end of the term for an agreed upon price. I kind of think about rent to own.
It is a lot like rent to own.
Yeah, which I'm not a huge fan of.
Well, rent to owns aren't, I mean, they're very, very rare. And if you see
Yeah.
rent to owns on Facebook or anywhere else, they are typically a scam. Just so you know, so beware.
Yeah, so and if you think about what it is, so lease option, essentially you're getting the option to purchase the property. So you're gonna be leasing it for a certain amount of time, and then you'll have the option to purchase it. A lot of time, again, there's a predetermined price. If you read the full chapter, it's interesting because there's a story in there from Gary Keller around when he was in college. his dad bought a property that him and his sister stayed at, and they bought it this way with they bought the property and then they used it, and then they did lease options. So pretty much somebody was gonna rent the home from them and then eventually exercise their option to purchase it. They were not successful, meaning they didn't qualify for the financing for it. And he went through that 4 times. So he collected rent from 4 tenants who eventually didn't get to purchase the property because they didn't qualify. And then eventually they got to sell it at the end. Obviously now over time, this property has appraised. This is a good option, I would say, from an investor standpoint. I think could be for an investor a good option. I'm very cautious with buyers on this, like your traditional buyer. And this is my opinion on it. If I can give it to you guys all, it's the Gary Keller example. Like I tell a buyer, okay, like, because I've had people ask me about that, because the rent to own concept is pretty much the same, right? You're gonna have the option to own this property, but what if you don't qualify in 3 years?
And you might not qualify in 3 years.
Then potentially that money's all just gonna stay with
Gone.
the seller, and then they take the property back.
That's
Well, they never
right.
take it back, they never lost it, but essentially they don't have to sell it to you. So I would look at, before somebody explores that, I would look at, why are you not qualifying right now? Like, what is it? Is it and you'll see when we get to the buyer side, is it a credit issue? Is it an income issue, or lack of assets? And can you truly resolve that in the time period for that option? If it's a 3-year option, I would be working with a strong lender and a credit repair company to say, hey, can I in 3 years, following your plan, get whatever it is I need to improve up. And I remember one of the lenders I worked with, and he was really good at that. He would say, hey, you don't qualify today, and he would in his system put scenarios, and it was like a simulator, and they could tell us, hey, if you do these 5 things, your score or whatever you needed to improve would improve to then qualify you. So I would look into that further before you start doing lease options and lease purchase as a solution. However, the options there.
And so build really good relationships with your mortgage lenders, because they will do that. A good mortgage lender will do that for a buyer.
Yep. The last one on this, before we get to the buyer side of what buyers can do, is on the bottom of page 208. It says, finally, then there's the wraparound mortgage, and assumable mortgages sit at the bottom of the list. And generally they sit at the bottom of the list because of the due on sale clause. I just learned something the other day as I was doing some research. Did you know that they sell insurance for due on sale?
Yes,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
So traditionally, if you assume a mortgage, a lot of times that is, if it's, well, yes, if you take over a property and it changes title, your lender will say, hey, no, wait a minute, you sold that property, you owe us the full mortgage amount. And there's actually now insurance companies out there, I don't know how long this existed. However, there are insurance companies that will write a policy for if a bank hits you with the due on sale clause. That's something, again, I would say that it's probably the last thing I would be trying to do.
Yeah.
I think of all the options for sellers, I would really spend most of the time with either seller contributions, which seller funding for buy downs can really be the same thing as contribution. That can really be worked into the same conversation, and then owner financing.
I agree.
Yeah. Oh, actually, well, the owner financing the second also too. I think the owner financing in the second
Yeah,
mortgage
the
would be a good
second
option.
mortgage isn't a bad option.
No. Yeah. Any questions you guys have on that before we go into the buyer side? Is any of this a surprise to you, or did you all know that this all existed as potential options to put a deal together?
I hadn't read the chapter, and I'm new to this industry, so it's kind of new to me.
Yeah.
Good.
I've heard of all of it. I just haven't digested or worked with any of it. So I think once you actually work with it is when you really wrap your hands around it, your arms
You
around
become
it.
an expert.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the key, Susan, to what you said, to what both of you just said, is just knowing that when a deal is becoming tougher to put together, don't give up. Revisit this chapter and figure out, do you know all parties' motivation, and what does it take to get it done? And you never know. I mean, if somebody's got enough equity or again, no mortgages, they might be open to financing or a second or some combination of all of them.
Mhm.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. The next, so go to page 210. It's funny, it says in here, when buyers have difficulty qualifying for a mortgage loan, it's usually because of the CIA.
Yeah.
He's referring to credit, income, and assets, not the other CIA.
Yeah.
So you'll see that at the bottom of that page on 210. In a shift, lenders tend to tighten their lending standards. So knowing proven workarounds for all three can become essential for some buyers. So what are the workarounds around credit, income, and assets? So we're going to go to a couple things here. On the next page, though, on 211, it says, if your buyers have credit issues that can't be quickly remedied, then you're probably back to appealing to the seller for owner financing, a contract for deed, a lease purchase, or lease option, or lease purchase, or some other type of financing. So let's get into what can buyers do. So on page 212 is the first one, gift letters or gift funds. Have you guys heard of that before?
No. Mm-mm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what I-
Yeah, gift funds is, you can, typically.
Yes.
Typically, it's a family member, a parent, a sibling, grandparent that will gift you the funds, and they have to supply the letter to the mortgage company.
Yeah,
Actually, we almost did that with a family member, so yes, I did hear about that.
yeah. You know, I've had folks I've worked with in the past that without gift funds from a family, they could not have put the deal together.
Yeah, many times. I've done that in the past too. Many times.
Yep. And then on that page there's some approved sources for financial gifts. One thing you have to definitely keep in mind, and it goes into it in the next page, is you must keep a paper trail and understand that a lender will likely do an independent verification. So you can't just say, oh, I got a gift from whoever. Like, you need to have that conversation with the lender before you start taking money from someone to put towards your home purchase, because that money does need to be sourced.
Yeah, they will check
Mhm.
both accounts to see the money coming out of their account, where it came from, and they will see the money going into the account. So they will check that. They do check that.
This one I've had people do before on page 213. The next one is another creative avenue available to buyers is selling or refinancing another asset.
No thanks.
Absolutely.
What was that, Jess?
No thanks.
No, thanks.
But
You
they
know,
do it.
you know, it's funny. No, actually, no, it's funny that he said that, because in the book it even says that don't assume. You'd be surprised the buyer's true motivation once they're in that position. I think it even, as it says here, boats, cars, stock options, etc. You'd be surprised what somebody's willing to sell off to make their dreams come true for their family.
I have a funny story.
Huh?
Oh, I have just a quick short story to tell, because my dad was in real estate years ago, and he was very creative. And I remember hearing him talk about having these buyers take their car loans and put them in other family members' names.
Yep.
And he would do anything to make the deal work. And I always remembered hearing that one.
You know, that's a common one. I've had people do that too. I had a couple refinance their car loan under their family member.
Yep.
In order to make the deal happen.
Absolutely.
Because what does that car loan do? It takes away their debts, right? And their payments, their obligations. So their debt to income ratios can now be reduced, now qualifying them. When we think about people's car payments today, 300, 400, no judgment.
Oh,
I mean,
car payments are, I know people who have $600, $700, $800 car payments.
Maserati 900 on TV the other night.
Yeah, well, that's good. So
That's
it costs too much money. per
Is it?
car.
That's not that bad.
I know, not for a Maserati, 900.
Keep in mind when you're approaching this, you have to work with the lender. Anything in this section or with the buyers, you really got to work with the lender, because you got to make sure whatever they do truly works. And I'm going to give you an example right now, because the next one, the third thing, is paying off or refinancing existing debt. That doesn't always work though.
Oh, it doesn't.
Does not always work. And you know, so I had a gentleman. I was on the list side, the buyer side. The guy had multiple extensions. The seller was trying to do everything possible to give them more time to qualify, because the gentleman, the buyer, not my buyer, so I don't know like the full scope, but basically what ultimately came of it was that he paid a debt off that he thought was just going to help him in his score, and it didn't. So then the combination of that and rates completely took him out. So before you go start paying off school loans and medical loans and credit cards and, you know, Gold's Gym from 2006
Yeah.
that's sitting there waiting for you to
Gold's
pay them. I had a Gold's Gym credit.
Yes, you did.
Gold's Gym came after me
Yeah.
one time. So just be very cautious that again, you're partnering with your lender before they start paying off or refinancing any existing debt.
It's like you never let a buyer's not allowed to use their credit anymore. They're not allowed to pay anything off without their mortgage person knowing and saying yes.
The next one on here,
Is there another comment?
the comment, I'm sorry, I missed it. Yeah, there's a good point. Yeah, I mean, the guys, there's books out there. I'm not this, I know I have them at home. Oh, man, there's even books from biggerpockets.com. The founder of Bigger Pockets, if you go on their website, you can find it on the resources. I want to say it's called like 10 ways to buy with little to no money down, something like that. And it talks a lot into these concepts a little bit deeper as well. It does it from the perspective of an investor. Yeah, there's nothing wrong. It could be applied to a traditional buyer as well.
Mhm.
The next one is there, having a non-occupant co-borrower.
Yeah.
You know, I had to do that one time recently in 2019.
I know people who have done that. They needed to get
Yeah.
another person to sign on the mortgage.
Yeah, that one's a little tougher, you know, but it says, hey, find a mom, dad, son, daughter, brother. I had my brother one time because, you know, you guys know in real estate, we report our income for qualifying for a mortgage is our net, not our gross commission income. So if we make $100,000 in gross commission income, that's not what you use to qualify for a mortgage. And yet, but if I go buy a car, I can use that number and I can buy any car I want with that number. So I had to use my brother one year to buy a condo. I had to use my brother because the numbers I was reporting was not enough for what I needed at that time. So I had my brother in there. Luckily, he was there to help me out. Sometimes, I mean, that's what you got to get, a non-occupant co-borrower to help you out. And then here it talks about also borrowing against your 401k. Did you guys know you can borrow against your 401k to buy a house?
Mhm.
No.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example where I used it. So in 2014 is when I bought my first house, like ever. That's when I had my daughter and I had the down payment. I used an FHA loan. Back at that point, I mean, FHA was all over the place. It wasn't like I was in a buyer's market too. So I had a 3.5% down, and then I borrowed 14,000 against my 401k, which I then was making payments on with interest. So that went towards me, and I was able to just borrow the money and slowly pay it off at each check, and I was able to get into my house. You know, that 14 grand was able to help cover the closing cost and just additional funds for moving.
Mhm.
Now you got to check with whoever you have that 401k with to make sure you are able to
with
borrow.
penalties.
Yeah, well, they're generally not a penalty to borrow on it, but meaning like what
If
the
that.
rate?
You're right.
Yeah, what's the rate?
Yeah,
What are the
cost,
terms?
right.
How much time do you have? Because like mine, they amortized it over 15 years. So I had a really low payment.
Low.
Yeah, I had a really low payment on it, and then I ultimately ended up having to pay it off very quickly because I was leaving the company to get into real estate. So part of leaving the company meant I needed to pay that money back.
Yeah.
So I had it, but it was a great way for me to get a low rate. It was a very competitive rate, and a low payment too, because of the 15-year amortization. And it was just my own money I was borrowing against. Yeah. Any questions on any of that we covered so far? Got about 12 minutes, so I'm gonna go a little quicker so I can hit the last one here. So now page 214, it gets into creative things that lenders can do to finance a transaction. First thing it talks about first off is just really having a knowledgeable lender to work with. I mean, that can go a long way.
Yeah, you need to build your lender partner relationships. It's very, very important. You know, everything is not done by cash here. People do get mortgages, and people are gonna start getting mortgages. There's more buyers that are gonna come out of the woodwork. So you've got to have very good lender relationships.
Yep. And I would not start writing anybody offers until I had a conversation with this lender.
Oh, never. even if you have a pre-approval letter, I don't care if you have a pre-approval letter, on the pre-approval letter, it has the name of the lender. You call the mortgage guy and have a conversation with them.
Yep.
Always have conversations with them, because a lot of people come here to buy properties and they have letters from people all over the country. Well, who are they? You don't know them, so
Yep.
always conversations.
The first one that it talks about lender funded buy down. So the same idea with the seller paying a credit towards the buy down. Plenty of lenders have the ability to do that as well.
Yes, they do. All you
And-
have to do is ask.
And if they tell you no, ask another one just in case.
Mhm.
Just saying, always have to, my thought is always have 2 or 3 go-to lenders, because with different situations, like for example,
Have three go-to lenders,
2 to 3.
3. I can't.
If you can do
that.
this, then I'll let you have your, can you do this?
Yeah.
It's so it's interesting, because whenever I would have a consumer that I could tell was gonna be, what's the right word to sound offensive, like, when there was an
Challenge.
opportunity around their CIA,
Right,
credit, income,
right,
assets,
challenge, you're challenged.
that I would go to a certain lender for that, because I knew that lender just had a way and options.
Mhm.
Yeah, and there's lenders, I mean, man, who am I thinking of right now? There's a lender in town that has a big reputation for this, for being very creative and getting deals done.
Cross-country mortgage,
Oh, Laura Maxwell? Oh,
Lauren,
wow.
yeah, cross country mortgage.
country mortgage, they, in my mind, they're like the most creative.
Yeah, cross country more, that's the company's cross country, yeah, they're one of those for sure. So,
Well, that's because they're a direct lender. Direct
Right.
lenders are always good.
all right, I'm gonna go
No.
fast and hit these
Yeah.
bullet points, guys. The next one is Fannie Mae, so like FHAs, VAs, those are obviously great options, and I think you're gonna see a lot more of that now as we are getting to a more stable / buyers market. So I think, well, I mean, I'm already seeing it now. FHA and VA
Yeah.
buyers are winning.
VAs, yeah.
They're standing out
Oh,
again. Yep. That was it, I think, actually.
And understand with an
Yeah, that was it.
FHA and a VA loan, there are requirements as far as repairs to the house and things like that when the appraisals and things are done. So you have
Yeah.
to be aware of that.
Yeah, that was it on my notes. So actually, I think overall, the key thing with this is lender buy downs, the Fannie Mae programs. We talked about the lender being a strong lender, and it talks here about automated underwriting, just, them being able to run simulations, and just again, a well-versed lender that doesn't stay in the box, if you will.
Yeah.
That's not so black and white, and can think outside the box as well and be creative. I think between knowing that there's options for all 3 parties involved, sellers, buyers, and lenders, I think the reality is just a bunch of combinations of different ways that you can put deals together. And again, as you're having tougher time with selling a property, again, it's generally it's either condition or price, or some combination of the two. Sometimes from the seller's perspective, them getting creative and offering something of value, such as like owner financing or credits, could get their property sold.
I had a conversation, my son is actually vice president of loan operations in Boston of a big bank, and licensed here too, they do mortgages here. And I was asking him today, and he says they are getting slammed right now with loans coming in. I asked him about the adjustable rate mortgage, and he agrees that he thinks we might be seeing that coming back again. He was with Citibank when that was a big thing before, but he says that we might see that come back again as an option. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah. Boom. Yeah.
Well,
Boom. Boom.
I would be able to sleep at night if I talked someone into a variable rate mortgage.
again, being creative. and
Oh, boy.
It's a gamble, but just the same, we may see it again, I'm
Oh.
not saying that you're gonna go for loans that haven't been, what's the word I'm trying to say, qualified. Remember, they had loans that people.
Well,
didn't-
that's different. That was legal.
That was
stuff.
different.
That's not gonna happen.
It-
Yeah, no, I think lending now is way different scenario than what it
Much
was
different.
when the market did what it did in 06, 08. So we're dealing with different circumstances for
Yeah.
sure. So, guys, we have a couple of minutes. I mean, what other questions do you have on the creative financing side, or just any other topics that we can hit on for the last few minutes? If not, we can let you go.
I got to read the chapter and then I'll probably have some questions.
Yeah, take a look at
Go
it.
around.
Yeah, next week, read number 12, and then we'll be wrapping it up. My game plan, as I was stating, is that on Tuesday, Thursdays, because everybody here is in group coaching, Tuesdays and Thursdays, we'll stay with our individual coaching sessions. I want to start bringing us all together on Wednesdays, just because we already have that rhythm going. So that one would always be virtual, because there's some things like, for example, CMAs, command, marketing, just different things that I want to teach all of you guys, like in the computer, that would be good for screen sharing. So I'm thinking Wednesdays, this time would be the times that we do that. I do want to make mention, Patricia Rose sent out some communication for next week on Thursday. We're going to move group coaching from, instead of 1:30 to 2:30, it'll be wait, is it for next week or tomorrow? Wait a minute, I think it's tomorrow.
I think it's tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah, I'm sorry, tomorrow, it'll be 1 to 2 tomorrow, because at 2 o'clock, there's a training with Becky around shift, that I want you guys to attend as well. So we'll be group coaching 1 to 2 tomorrow, and then shift call with Becky, our previous team leader at Naples, which is amazing. Love you guys to be on that call. Cool?
And there's also, what is that other thing that's the FES
Oh,
class?
yeah, and then next
Oh.
next Thursday, there'll be another training. That one's not, no, I'm sorry, not Wednesday, or it's Wednesday.
Yes.
It's on Wednesday. Be on the lookout. The girls are gonna post this on Facebook too. On Wednesday, there's an FES class about scripting. It's from 9, I wanna say it was either 9:30 to 11 or like 9.
It's 9 to 11:30 on
11:30.
the 29th.
Put that on your calendar.
6 scripts that changed my career. This is Chris Hurley. He is a master Jedi script person. He is amazing. Everyone needs to be on
So
that.
what was that time again?
It's
9.
from 9 to 11:30. I will send out the link that you have to register on. It's, I'm telling you, it's going to be amazing.
I do want to do one thing in these last 5 minutes that I have. So, wow, what's the best way for me to do this? Take a calculator out. You guys see my screen?
Yes.
Can you get a calculator out? Okay. What do you guys think between Naples, Marco? Like, what's our average commission, gross commission income on a deal?
Per side,
Per side, yes, per side.
2.5 to 3%.
2.5.
All right. So let's use
2.65 is what the average is.
2.5%.
Okay.
Our average price point.
1.5.
Okay, let's even be on the more conservative side in case because really I don't even think it's 1.5, our average price point. It's lower.
850.
Yes, it's 850. So let's take 850, my chicken scratch here, and take 2.5%. What is that number? Give me
21,250.
21,250, and multiply that. I'm going to be on the conservative side. Actually, it's by 7. How much is that?
148,750.
148,750. So that represented 148,000. I gotta get better at writing with this thing.
You need a
Page right now.
100. I need a pen. So $148,750. If I told you guys, I am telling you that you can make that and more. It actually could be higher. I cut the number in half in a 7-week period. 7 weeks.
7 weeks.
What would be your
What
first
are you
thought?
laughing?
What's your first thought?
Sign me up.
Okay.
Good.
I heard another laugh. Who was the laugh from? Was that you, Vanessa?
Yeah.
Why are you laughing, Vanessa? It's okay. Tell me what you're thinking. You can be. This is a safe space.
Yeah.
I'm still new, so I don't